Despite what you might hear from popular televangelists and online preachers, Christianity isn't just a once off deal where you say the sinner's prayer, confess your life to Jesus, and it's done. But it is rather a continuous grappling with yourself and submitting yourself to God. Because as humans, that is something we struggle with. We have a sin nature, and us giving ourselves up to God means dying to that sinful nature and getting to live in the goodness and grace that God has given us and allowing the Holy Spirit to shine through us. But that is so difficult. And the gospel is a very simple gospel, right? Jesus gave us basically two simple commandments: love me as I've loved you, and love your neighbor as yourself. Simple. But carrying it out is a whole different game. And I think it's important for us as Christians, just in general, to remember that we'll never get to a point where we've got it all figured out and we never sin and our relationship with Jesus is at 100 and it stays that way the whole time. We're always going to be continuously grappling with ourselves and with God, right? Because, again, because of our sin nature, but more specifically because of our pride and just the nature we have, right? Which is embedded in that sin nature. Because when you look at the sins, that have been committed, you look at Lucifer's sin, right? It was a sin of pride. He wanted a throne above God. He wanted to be like God. He wasn't happy with the way he was made, and he was made like wonderful. It says in the Bible, he was the most beautiful creature God had created. Right? He had something like he was powerful. He was very powerful, but he wanted to be like more powerful than God. He wanted to be God basically, and that was his pride. When you look at the sin in the garden, it was a sin of pride. It was us basically saying, screw you, God, I don't want to listen to what you said. Yes, you've given us everything we need. You've given us this wonderful garden and everything we'll ever need. You've given me a companion, we've got everything we need, but you said, oh, don't eat of like that tree. And then Satan came in and he's like, oh, but if you eat, you'll know. God doesn't want you to know these things. And you were like, I want to know. And then we ate the thing. And then the fall ensued because we're prideful. And that's our constant grapple with God, honestly. Just very simply, pride is where we suffer. And that's why the Bible makes a consistent effort to remind us to humble ourselves, right? It says God opposes the proud and exalts the humble, right? He who exalts himself will be humbled, and he who humbles himself will be exalted, right? The meek will inherit the earth. There's all these things about humbling yourself. If you're not like a little child, you will not get into the kingdom of heaven. Why? Because when we have pride is what separates us from God, to put it simply. It is what separates us from God. Because if you think about it, what stops us from fully submitting ourselves to God and fully submitting ourselves to God's will in our lives? Let's talk about sin, right? Because sin is obviously like the biggest manifestation of this, right? It's the manifestation of our struggles with God. When we sin, what are we saying, right? Let me use myself as an example. When I sin, what am I saying, right? Let's use an example. Let's say if I'm angry with someone, right? Jesus says, if you're angry with a brother, you've committed murder in your heart, right? Or let's say I lust over a woman, right? Jesus says if you lust over a woman, you've committed adultery with her, which is the breaking of one of the 10 commandments. When I'm doing that, what's happening there? I am allowing my sin nature to overcome what Jesus is telling me. I'm not being obedient, to put it simply, right? Jesus said, if your right arm causes you to sin, cut it off. Or if your eyes cause you to sin as well. I was going to say to lust, but I'm not sure. If your eye causes you to sin, gouge it out. Because it is better to be in the kingdom of heaven without your right hand and without your eyes than to not be in the kingdom of heaven at all. But when I ignore that and I go in and I lust, right, or I get angry with someone, and I really tap into that and I carry this unforgiveness in my heart, I'm basically saying in my head, I have a right to feel this way. I have a right to do what I'm doing. And I don't want to listen to what Jesus says, because in this moment, I'm doing what's best for me, right? That's it. I'm doing what's best for me. Picture somebody who, let's say somebody commits adultery. Let's use like one of the worst sins if we're going to categorize them, right? Somebody who commits adultery, right? What that person is doing in that moment is they're just thinking in terms of what they want in that moment. They're completely disregarding what Jesus said. And when you disregard what Jesus said, it's because, well, first of all, you don't trust that he's doing what's best for you, because in that moment you're like, this is what's best for me. I'm going to do it regardless of what Jesus said, because I know more than him. That's the crux of it. And you don't trust that he's out there for your good, right? Or let's use something maybe a little bit less extreme, right? Let's say I'm getting frustrated with God, right? Let's say I'm getting frustrated. Let's say you're getting frustrated with God because you want something, like you really want this thing to work out. You really want, this particular business to blow up, and you want to like make a lot of money, and you're like, I'll be fine, like I'll be fine with money. Or maybe you're waiting for a spouse, right? And it's just not the time. When you get angry with God in that moment, you're basically saying, God, I know what's best for me. Just give me my wife. I'll be fine, right? Give me my wife and I'll be happy. But God is saying, I see things in the future that you don't see. And that's why it's not time, right? Or that's why I'm not giving you this. Or that's why I'm not giving it to you like this. Or I'm not giving it to you yet, right? Because this is so mind-boggling, right? It's so interesting. Obviously, we know God is God, but we don't live that way. If we truly had a fear and reverence of God and just how big He is, we would obey Him, because we know, like, well, first of all, He knows infinitely more than we do, but also, He's got the power to do whatever He wants. Like, you don't want to feel like His wrath, basically. But get this, right? God is eternal, right? So He's outside the bounds of space and time, which means not only does He know the future and does He see what's going to happen in the future, but He's there right now. Like, try that one, right? For a mind-boggling exercise. He's in the future right now. That alone should just remind us just how small we are, right? We don't know what the future looks like. We don't even know what it looks like, but God's already there. He's there right now. So I think it's important for us, again, to humble ourselves and to understand that God knows infinitely more than we do. And that's literally what we struggle with. But the laziness aspect that comes in it is that people who don't know much about Christianity, or don't read the Bible and listen to what God is saying, right? We just think, oh, Christianity is just a simple thing. I'm just gonna come in and say, oh, I believe in Jesus and I'm saved and I can carry on doing what I want. But it's like, no, Jesus calls you to take up your cross. He calls you to take up your cross. Taking up your cross, I made a video on it before. I've gone into it in extensive length, right? But taking up your cross is the hardest thing we'll ever do. Because what taking up your cross means is dying to your old self. Taking your old self, right? Taking the old man, nailing him to a cross, and you're crucifying him. You're crucifying your old self, and you're putting forth the true self that has been made in God's image. The true self, that loves God the way He has loved you, and the one that loves his neighbor as himself, right? And again, those are difficult. Like, loving your neighbor as yourself means you care about them just as much as you do about yourself. And us as humans, we're very narcissistic. We wake up thinking about ourselves, we spend the whole day thinking about ourselves, and we go to sleep thinking about ourselves. And it takes effort for us to actually consider things from other people's perspective. But loving your neighbor as yourself means that every time you interact with them, or every time you do something that might affect them, you're thinking about them. You're thinking about things from their perspective, and you're humbling yourself, right? And you're exalting them, basically. Like, you're worried more about them than not yourself. And that is a very difficult thing for us to do as humans. But we mustn't be lazy in the fact that, yes, we are saved. Like, once saved, always saved. But as James says in the whole book of James, if you have true and sincere faith, your works will show as a fruit of that faith. And Jesus said, you will know them by their fruits. So I think it's important for us to not be lazy and to actually take up our cross. And we need to take up our cross daily, which is a struggle. And you'll be doing it until the day you die. It's not going to be like, oh, I'm going to figure out my relationship with Jesus. I'm going to walk in this wall for my life, and then one day I wake up and I'm just good for the rest of my life. Because no, life is long. It's short, but it's also a long journey. And things change. You could be doing wonderful. You could be walking in God's will for your life right now. You're really like on top of your sin, like you're really in tune with Jesus, and then tragedy strikes. 2 years from now, 5 years from now, right? Or maybe you're walking in your will and you get married and everything is going great, and then marriage is just its own trouble, right? You have marriage troubles, and now all of a sudden, you've got things to work out again. Right, you've got things to work out in your relationship with Jesus. Or you have kids. Again, kids, wonderful. Like, I love kids, but we all know that they have massive responsibility. Once you have kids, your life is never the same, and something can happen to your kids. Maybe you might have a kid who's just struggling with, like, they're just sick, and you go through a season, where you have to take them to, like, the hospital a lot, and that really rocks your faith. Something like that can happen, right? When you get older, and things in the world are changing, and Christians are being more persecuted, or whatever it is. Like, things change all the time, so it is a continuous thing. We can't afford to be lazy, right? And I'm not remembering all the things, but I know in Ephesians, I believe it is, Paul says we should put on the breastplate of righteousness, and then he uses all these other analogies of things we should carry. But basically, we should be walking in the Spirit every single day, taking up our cross daily. And it's important that we don't stop, because the enemy, Satan, is always looking. He's always waiting for a moment to strike. And that's why we must overcome our laziness in Jesus. But you guys let me know what you think of the topic in the comment section below. Make sure you subscribe to join the community. And until next time, see you guys.